Nigeria and the United States are navigating sensitive discussions following allegations of attacks on Christian communities in Nigeria. Now, while the government here rejects claims of genocide, ongoing talks aim to clarify those facts, manage tensions, and strengthen bilateral cooperation. Now, these discussions not only address the current dispute, but also provide lessons on handling complex diplomatic issues, ensuring transparency, and building trust between nations in future engagements. Well, joining us now is Africa Affairs analyst Achike Chude. We'll be breaking down the progress of this dialogue, analyzing how both countries are managing the sensitive issues at hand, and draw key lessons for future diplomatic and bilateral negotiations on contentious matters. It's great to have you on the program. Thank you for joining me today, Achike Chude.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Howard. Thank you for having me.
Well, in your opinion, how has Nigeria, after being named a country of particular concern and all the strong rhetoric that's been coming from Washington, how has the government managed the diplomatic pressure, in your opinion?
Yeah, I would say the set up serious diplomatic machinery. And we saw a flurry of diplomatic engagements. Of course, Nigeria started off by saying that the designation of Nigeria as a country of concern, was unfortunate, and Nigeria did not deserve that. And as to the allegations, Nigeria strongly and stoutly denied Christian genocide. And then, of course, as a result, then the Nigerian Senate weighed in on the matter, also speaking on behalf of Nigeria. But that did not seem to convince the Americans. Of course, the whole of the issue was being driven by no other person than the American president himself. It was his tweet that set off this flurry of activities. So Nigeria has, actionally done a lot of things in that direction, engaging the American government, sending a delegation led by the National Security Advisor and other high-ranking security officials and diplomats to the country's capital for a discussion. That discussion led to further engagements by the American government, sending Riley Moore, a delegation of 5 to Nigeria. They left Nigeria late last week and back to the United States, and then they said they were going to give a comprehensive report on what they had found in Nigeria. Of course, they had access. They were given access by the Nigerian government to the IDP camps, and they spoke firsthand to the victims of to some of the victims of the massacres that have taken place in Benue State, and then spoke with religious leaders from across the divide, and then also on the government side spoke with the National Security Advisor and the Attorney General of the Federation, and then now went back to the United States. And Riley Moore, after that particular visit, of course, gave an interview to some in the media, and then talking to Fox News, Faulkner, Faulkner in Fox News, he said that he talked about the harrowing experience of listening to some of these victims in person, and that it was quite a terrible thing. They are still reiterating the fact that there is a Christian genocide in Nigeria, but I think that in a way has been attenuated. There is now this general acceptance that, acceptance that a lot of people are being killed, not necessarily Christians, but people of other faiths. And they are using one word, proportionality, that you have more Christians being killed in proportion to all other people that are being killed. So, all in all, they seem, recently, the latest statement from Riley Moore, though we are not told that he has reported to the American president about his findings in Nigeria, but he seemed much more reconciliatory. And they talked about finding common grounds, and then on the basis of this, they can explore further discussions. And so I think right now it is a bit favorable for Nigeria. The vitriolic, the rhetoric has gone down, has been tempered with some level of moderation, and I think that is good. But we don't know exactly what he's going to report to Trump. It's only after that I'm sure we're going to see some other movements in whatever direction, depending on how the Americans see the visit by the representatives that came to Nigeria.
And yes, we are waiting on the report from Congressman Moore as to what he's going to tell Donald Trump about his visit here. But in your view, What specific security or intelligence gaps in Nigeria is the U.S. best positioned to help fill through any kind of new strategic alliance?
Well, if the Americans are sounding a bit more reconciliatory, it is because I think they have started to see some things, the fruits of engagement with the Nigerian government already. Again, it was after this series of activities between both countries, officials from both countries, that the President, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, declared a state of emergency on the security situation in the country. And a lot of people believe that it stems from the engagement with the American government. We have seen the exit of the defense minister, Badaru. People are also calling for the exit of some other people that they feel have question marks, over their role in the terrorism that's going on in the country. And then we have seen the coming to power of the new minister of defense, who was the former minister, the erstwhile chief of army staff. So all of these things have been moves in the right direction. And then we are also told that at the level of intelligence gathering and that the American government is beginning to have a bit of confidence, and they are beginning to share some bit of intelligence with the Nigerian authorities. But obviously a lot still needs to be done, because in the midst of these engagements, we have been having this violence, pockets of violence taking place in other parts of the country. That has the tendency to undermine what has been achieved so far. So everybody, especially the Nigerian government, I think, is trying to walk around the clock. But we must say that you have the impression that the government, was complacent all this while. It didn't need the Donald Trump to weigh in on the insecurity in the country to get all these activities going by the Nigerian government. It is a natural responsibility for them to want to keep the citizens safe.
And what key lessons for Nigeria could we have learned in managing our sovereignty and narrative when we come to face with any kind of strong Western nation or political pressure from global powers like the U.S.? What lessons could we have learned in this situation?
No, well, I think the first lesson we learn is to even avoid the situation of the insecurity that's going on in this country, and it's avoidable. What is responsible for it? You must go to the root cause. It's misgovernance or bad governance. Over the years, has nothing to do with this present administration, but this bad governance straddles across various administrations in this country from 1999 to date. Because if you look at the root cause of the crisis of insecurity in the country, of course, there's underdevelopment, illiteracy, poverty, grinding poverty, and all that, religious zealotry, and yet you have a government that's in place that was unable to stem the tide. Obviously, the Nigerian state is very weak right now, because we are not just talking about the weakness of institutions. We are also talking about the weakness of the state at the center. We are talking of the fact that, there are so many ungoverned spaces in this country, that these bad state actors are taking advantage of. So these are some of the issues. The issue of bad governance, I think, is a lesson. Eventually, it leads to all manners of consequences, such as insecurity that we are also seeing. Then, because when you get your house in order, and that's what we tell people really. Yes, you want to project strength, but for you to project strength internationally, and that's why it would appear that Nigeria is actually, weak as a negotiating partner when it comes to what is going on right now, because this Nigeria that you see now is not Nigeria of about 30, 40 years ago, when we had that strength in the country in terms of having a robust economy, having much more serious political leaders who I think understood better what needed to be done, and then with the strength that we had at home, we were able to project that strength. So this is a greatly weakened Nigeria, and then all hands must be on deck to try to rebuild our country. And that's why when you get into negotiations with great powers like the United States, Nigeria, would always, at this particular point in time, negotiate from a point of weakness, because America, you would say to a large extent, it has the tendency to want to bully countries. from time to time. America has always done so. That's what the great powers, do all of the time. And that's why at the international level, you have institutions like the United Nations where different countries, regardless of your size, can go there and distillate, whatever issues you have with other countries. But right now, we are seeing that when people talk about the rules-based international order, there is really nothing like that. The big powers dictate the show. They call the shots. And so we have seen that happen over and over again with countries like America, Russia, China, and all the others. So it's a lesson that we need to build our country. We need to put our country where the country needs to be with all the resources that we have, natural and human resources. Nigeria, has no business really being in the position that she finds herself, and that is what has undermined our credibility and our status in the international community. So we need to do something about that. It will take time because a lot of water has passed under the bridge. And so it is going to take time to try to bring us back to where we were during the apartheid days, when we almost, I won't say single-handedly, when we dictated a lot of the things that happened in apartheid, South Africa, Mozambique, Angola, and the rest. Nigeria was there in all of those places, playing very, very, very credible roles, in the continent.
Yeah, that was our heyday. And I guess for the United States, there's some lessons that can be learned for them as well in terms of more effective methods for global powers to engage with sovereign African countries when it comes to issues that border on human rights, religion, and issues that they're not very conversant with in their own country. But back home here in Nigeria, watching how all of this has played out, how effectively have the Nigerian Christian and other civil society organizations, in your opinion, how have they been able to directly influence the dialogue, either by petitioning the U.S. or even pressuring the government? How well did they do?
Well, for those people who helped contribute to bringing up this matter, bring it in the international arena, I think they did well. People might say, well, they are being unpatriotic, but there's a time for truth. There's a time to do the right thing, because it's not just the Christians that were suffering. Nigerians across, the length and breadth of this country were suffering from the activities of these despicable characters, these non-state actors that were trying to, destroy everything that our country stands for, so if they had not brought it up, if Trump had not made the statement that Trump made, some of the activities that we are seeing today, the renewed vigor with which the Nigerian authorities, especially the military, are pursuing this particular matter, all of this would not have happened, because we had gotten to a very, very dangerous situation where it seemed as if these terrorists and bandits had taken over. They operate at will, do whatever they want to do, and then they disappear, whether by day or by night. But now that we have this international focus on Nigeria, the government is being forced to be much more proactive. And you can see from what is happening, we have very little stories of governors decamping from opposition parties to the APC, to the National Party. We have very little stories of senators and members of House of Reps telling us, that they have decamped to the APC. This is still happening, but it's in the back burner. What is on the front seat right now is the insecurity in this country, and they need to do something about that. So in a way, that has helped to galvanize the members of National Assembly and then other institutions of government towards one focus, keeping this country safe, and then to prevent America acting in ways that might not be in the best interest of this country. We needed help. There's no doubt that we got to a level where we indicated through our inaction or action that we could no longer stem the tide of insecurity in this country. So those people who helped to bring it to the fore, I think I would commend them, but not because they want to denigrate this country, not because they want this country to be destroyed, but they want to save lives. And so if it is going to take them shouting from the rooftop to get the Nigerian government to work and then to get help from other countries, then I think that it was very well done. But the only thing is that in engagements, and it is critical, because America has not had a very stellar reputation when it comes to intervention in other countries, in the affairs of other countries. So we want to understand the parameters that Americans are using to engage with the Nigerian authorities to make sure that they do not go beyond some of these issues. And the Nigerian authorities must be very open. Let them, all of these deniers do not help anybody. You know, we must embrace the truth of what is happening in our country, because it's only when you do that, then it becomes clear that you are now ready to help yourself and to get other people to also help you.
Well said, well said. And just localizing this, how could this current tension of this CPC designation be viewed by our neighbors and other regional partners like the African Union or ECOWAS, seeing as our position? Does it diminish our regional standing, or does it complicate our already complicated Sahelian engagements and issues?
No, our regional standing, our standing as a country in West Africa and in Africa had been compromised before now. You cannot have this kind of actions or activities taking place in a country, no matter how powerful that country is, no matter how respected that country hitherto has been, and then it will not undermine the credibility and then the prestige and reputation of the country. It's as clear, you know, as anything. I mean, you had a situation where you are having more deaths in this country on a daily and monthly basis than you have in war-torn countries like maybe Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, and all that. 250 today, 150 tomorrow, and all that. And then children of over about 300 being kidnapped. It doesn't happen in any part of the country, you know. So it had diminished the reputation, you know, and the reputation of this country, you know, and it's not the best. Nigeria has always, you know, the role Nigeria played. Like I talked about the apartheid years. I talked about then even the Commonwealth Games, where Nigeria pulled out of the Commonwealth Games. I think, was it in Scotland? Every other African country pulled out. That was the power, that was the pull, that was the strength that Nigeria, you know, had at that time. And the country has lost its glory. There's no doubt about that. It's about trying to rebuild it. You know, once more, it's not going to be easy, but we need to have leaders that are committed, leaders that are ready to make sacrifices on behalf of the nation, not on behalf of themselves and their pockets. That is what we need. And then slowly and gradually, once we begin to overcome this insecurity situation, they will begin to build all the other pillars for national development that this country sorely needs. And then hopefully we can get back to that pedestal that where we once stood.
And, you know, beyond this current crisis, what permanent institutional structures can Nigeria and the U.S. formulate or establish to ensure that similar controversial claims can be addressed and de-escalated at a working level before they reach presidential level confrontations?
Well, the matter is already, I mean, has gotten to the very top, and every other thing is cascading from the top, you know, down. I don't know about building permanent institutions. I'll be wary about building any kind of, because are we talking about a security pact, for instance? Nigeria kicked against that a very long time ago, in 1962, if you remember, when the British wanted a security pact, a military pact with Nigeria. Nigerian youths, especially in the universities, said no, you know, and kept them out. And then we've had others too. In the Poda the Yar'Adua administration, when the Americans sought in a military pact also with Nigeria, Nigerians stood against that. Yes, we need help. There's no doubt about that, because no country can be an island on its own. Even the most powerful countries are also in need, you know, of help from other countries once in a while. If not for, I mean, not in terms of, at least maybe as trading partners, if not for any other thing.
Yeah.
You know, so yes, we need that help on an ad hoc basis, but I'm not sure it should be a permanent, you know, kind of help. Nigeria will always relate to the United States. America has always been an ally of of Nigeria for years, and I think that will continue. But for the purpose of this insecurity, whatever structure we put in place, I'm not sure should be a permanent structure. You know, they can work with us, you know, help us to overcome the present challenges, and then know where to get off.
Yeah. Well, always a pleasure to have you on Newsday. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me, Achike Chude, Africa Affairs Analyst.